Hi, everybody. It's Miss Amy, and I'm here to bring chapter 24, it's Miss Amy, and I'm here to bring chapter 24 and 25 of Roald Dahl's James and the Giant Peach with you. Now, remember, boys and girls, Miss Amy does not own the rights to this book. She just owns the book, and she's glad she gets to share it with you. So, yesterday when we left the book, they were flying up in the air, dangling from those seagulls. The Peach had just been up there, just bobbing around on the ground or in the air, and Miss Spider had gone down to check to make sure that there were no holes in there, because the sharks had been going after that Peach for quite a long time, hadn't they? And when she got down there, to her dismay, there were no holes, barely any. And the reason for that, and they explained it in the book, is because sharks' noses are way out here, but their mouths are way down here. So they never got a bite in. So that's a good thing. But now all of a sudden there's this ship down there with all these people on it, and they see the Peach flying over the sky. You know, that had to have been a sight for sore eyes. But luckily for them, just as the captain was about to call it in, they disappeared. Now, I wonder where they went, boys and girls. Let's go ahead and crack the spine of this book, and let's see where we go today. But up on the Peach itself, everyone was still happy and excited. I wonder where we'll finish up this time, the earthworm said. Who cares? They answered. Seagulls always go back to the land sooner or later. Up and up they went, high above the clouds, the highest clouds, the Peach swaying gently from side to side as it floated along. Whoo, boys and girls, Miss Amy would have an upset tummy, because it doesn't take much to make my tummy get upset. Wouldn't this be a perfect time for a little music? The ladybug asked. How about it, old grasshopper? With pleasure, dear lady, the old green grasshopper answered, bowing from the waist. Oh, hooray! He's going to play for us, they cried. And immediately the whole company sat themselves down in a circle around the old green musician, and the concert began. From the moment that the first note was struck, the audience became completely spellbound. And as for James, never had he heard such beautiful music as this. In the garden at home on summer evenings, he had listened many times to the sound of grasshoppers chirping in the grass, and he had always liked the noise that they made. But this was a different kind of noise altogether. This was real music. Chords, harmonies, tunes, and all the rest of it. And what a wonderful instrument the old green grasshopper was playing on. It was like a violin. It was almost exactly as though he were playing upon a violin. The bow of the violin, the part that moved, was his back leg. The strings of the violin, the part that made the sound, was the edge of his wing. He was using only the top of his back leg, the thigh, and he was stroking this up and down against the edge of his wing with incredible skill, sometimes slowly, sometimes fast, but always with the same easy flowing action. It was precisely the way a clever violinist would have used his bow, and the music came pouring out and filled the whole blue sky around them with magic melodies. When the first part was finished, everyone clapped madly, and Miss Spider stood up and shouted, "Bravo! Encore! Give us some more!" "Did you like that, James?" the old green grasshopper asked, smiling at the small boy. "Oh, I loved it," James answered. "It was beautiful. It was as though you had a violin in your hand." "A real violin," the old green grasshopper cried. "Good heavens! I like that, my dear boy. I'm a real violin. It is part of my body. But do all grasshoppers play their music on violins the same way as you do?" James asked. "No," he answered. "Not all. If you want to know, I happen to be a short horned grasshopper. I have two short fellers coming out of my head. Can you see them? There they are. They're quite short, aren't they? That's why they call me Shorthorn. And we Shorthorns are the only ones who play our music in the violin style using a bow. My longhorned relatives, the ones who have long curvy fillers coming out of their heads, make their music simply rubbing the edges of their two top wings together. They're not violinists, they're wing rubbers. And a rather inferior noise these wing rubbers produce, too. If I may say so, it sounds more like the banjo than a fiddle. How fascinating this all is, cried James. And to think that up until now I had never even wondered how a grasshopper made the sounds. My dear fellow, the old green grasshopper said gently, there are a whole lot of things in the world of ours that you haven't started wondering about yet. Where, for example, do you think I keep my ears? Your ears? Why, in your head, of course. But where, for example, do you think I keep my ears? Your ears? Why, in your head, of course. Everyone burst out laughing. Ha ha ha! Hee ha ha ha! You don't even know that, cried the centipede. Try again, said the old green grasshopper, smiling at James. You can't possibly keep them anywhere else. Oh, can't I? Well, I give up. Where do you keep them? Right here, the old green grasshopper said. One on each side of my tummy. It's not true. Of course it's true. What's so peculiar about that? You ought to see where my cousins, the crickets and the katydids, keep theirs. Where do they keep them? In their legs. One in each front leg, just below the knee. You mean you didn't know that either? The centipede said scornfully. You're joking, James said. Nobody could possibly have their ears in his legs. Why not? Because. Because it's ridiculous, that's why. You know what I think is ridiculous? The centipede said, grinning away as usual. I don't mean to be rude, but I think it's ridiculous to have ears on the sides of one's head. It certainly looks ridiculous. You ought to take a peek in the mirror some day and see yourself. Pest, cried the earthworm. Why must you always be so rude and rambunctious to everyone? You ought to apologize to James at once. Chapter 25. James didn't want the earthworm and the centipede to get into another argument, so he said quickly to the earthworm, Tell me, do you play any kind of music? No, but I do other things, some of which are really quite extraordinary, the earthworm said, brightening. Such as what? Asked James. Well, the earthworm said, next time you stand in a field or in a garden and look around you, then just remember this, that every grain of soil upon the surface of the land, every tiny little bit of soil that you can see, has actually passed through the body of an earthworm during the last few years. Isn't that wonderful? It's not possible, said James. My dear boy, it's a fact. You mean you actually swallow soil? like mad, the earthworm said proudly. In one end and out the other. Ugh. Boys and girls, think about that every time you touch the dirt. Whew, that's a good reason right there not to eat any soil, that's for sure. But what's the point? What do you mean, what's the point? Why do you do it? We do it for the farmers. It makes the soil nice and light and crumbly so that things will grow well in it. If you really want to know, the farmers couldn't do without us. We are essential. We are vital. So it is only natural that the farmer should love us. He loves us even more, I believe, than he loves the ladybug. The ladybug, said James, turning to look at her. Do they love you too? I'm told they do, the ladybug answered modestly, blushing all over. In fact, I understand that in some places the farmers love us so much that they go out and buy live ladybugs by the sackful and take them home and set them free in their fields. They are very pleased when they have lots of ladybugs in their fields. But why? James asked. Because we gobble up the nasty little insects that are gobbling up all the farmers' crops. It helps enormously, and we ourselves don't charge a penny for our services. I think you're wonderful, James told her. Can I ask you one special question? Please do. Well, is it really true that I can tell how old a ladybug is by counting her spots? Oh no, that's just a children's story, the ladybug said. We never change our spots. Some of us, of course, are born with more spots than others, but we never change them. Look at James here trying to count her spots and checking out Miss Ladybug's spots. The number of spots that a ladybug has is simply a way of showing which branch of the family she belongs to. I, for example, as you can see for yourself, am a 9-spotted ladybug. I'm very lucky. It is a fine thing to be. It is indeed, said James, gazing at the beautiful scarlet shell on the with the 9 black spots on it. On the other hand, the ladybug went on, some of my less fortunate relatives have no more than 2 spots altogether on their shells. Can you imagine that? They are called 2-spotted ladybugs, and very common. And ill-mannered they are, I regret to say. And then, of course, you have the 5-spotted ladybugs as well. They are much nicer than the 2-spotted ones, although I myself find them a trifle too saucy for my taste. But they are all of them sometimes Miss Amy gets tongue-tied. But they are all of them loved, said James. That's such a weird way of saying that. Yes, the ladybug answered quietly. They are all of them loved. It seems that almost everyone around here is loved, said James. How nice this is. Not me, cried the centipede happily. I'm a pest, and I'm proud of it. Oh, I'm such a shocking, dreadful pest. Hear, hear, the earthworm said. But what about you, Miss Spider? Asked James. Aren't you also much loved in the world? Alas, no, Miss Spider answered, sighing long and loud. I am not loved at all, and yet I do nothing but good. All day long I catch flies and mosquitoes in my webs. I'm a decent person. Okay, stop there. A spider is not a person. It's a spider. It's an arachnid. Okay, moving on. I know you are, said James. It's very unfair the way we spiders are treated, Miss Spider went on. Why, only last week your own horrible Aunt Sponge flushed my poor dear father down the hole in the bathtub. Oh, how awful, cried James. I watched the whole thing from a corner up there in the ceiling, Miss Spider murmured. It was ghastly. We never saw him again. A large tear rolled down her cheek and fell with a splash on the floor. Aw, look at poor Miss Spider. She's sad. That would be horrible to watch. But is it not very unlucky to kill a spider? James inquired, looking around at the others. Of course it's unlucky to kill a spider, shouted the centipede. It's about the unluckiest thing anyone can do. Look what happened to Aunt Sponge after she'd done that. Bump! We all felt it, didn't we, as the peach went over her. Oh, what a lovely bump that must have been for you, Miss Spider. It was very satisfactory, Miss Spider answered. Will you sing us a song about it, please? So the centipede did. Aunt Sponge was terrifically fat. Her tremendously flabby at that. Her tummy and waist were as soggy as paste. It was worse on the place where she sat. So she said I must make myself flat. I must make myself sleek as a cat. I shall do without dinner to make myself thinner, but along came the peach, oh beautiful peach, and made her far thinner than that. That was very nice, Miss Spider said. Now sing one about Aunt Spiker. With pleasure, the centipede answered, grinning. Aunt Spiker was thin as a wire, and as dry as a bone, only drier. She was so long and thin, if you carried her in, you could use her for poking the fire. I must do something quickly, she frowned. I want fat, I want pound upon pound. I must eat lots and lots of marshmallows and chunks till I start buggling out all around. Ah, yes, she announced, I have sworn that I'll alter my figure by dawn. Cried the peach with a snigger, I'll alter your figure, and ironed her out on the lawn. Everybody clapped and called out for more songs from the centipede, who at once launched into his favorite song of all. Once upon a time, when pigs were swine and monkeys chewed tobacco and hens took snuff to make themselves tough, and the ducks said quack, quack, quack-o, and porcupines drank fiery wines, and goats ate tapioca, and old Mother Hubbard got stuck in the Look out, centipede! Cried James. Look out! Oh, although you're probably glad that I finished singing Centipede's horrible songs. They're probably wonderful when Centipede sings them, but when Miss Amy sings them, not so much. That's where the chapter ends. So you'll have to stay tuned till tomorrow to find out why James is telling the centipede to look out. So until then, boys and girls, if you're watching this before bedtime, good night and sleep tight.